You know, almost a year ago, I reviewed a game called Strider. But the interesting thing about that review was that it was one of my most prolific ones about a game that I didn't like, but everyone else seemed to. But it wasn't part of mass reviews. Instead, it was part of why does this game exist. Now, games like Heavy Rain or Jak 2 fit into the category of games that I have similar opinions on. I hate them, but the masses seem to normally like them. But I covered those on mass reviews, since they're more modern, more complex games. Strider, though, was an interesting case. As an older game that's a lot more simple and easier to talk about, I covered it here, which is actually my first series that I ever created. If we're going all the way back to the Jurassic period of my channel, you can see that, yeah, I didn't have any series. I didn't have anything really set in stone. Rather, just a bunch of random videos that had no connection to one another. But then, out of the darkness, stepped Why Does This Game Exist? A series in which I covered games that are normally considered bad and gave them a second shot. Maybe they're terrible, maybe they're good. But Strider was also the first in that series as a game that people like, but I hate. So any sort of negative reception from me or from the general public can be considered, and then it can be put into this series rather than mass reviews. Now, with that being said, now that it's been almost a year, maybe I was unfair to Strider, you know? And I also figured out that it's actually not just a singular game. It's a whole franchise. I know. Insanity. How could they make a franchise out of something so terrible, right? Well, we're gonna find out. Maybe the whole franchise is good, and this one first game that was bad. Let's see. But first, I want to talk about the very first Strider game once again, because maybe I wasn't being fair to it. So let's give it another shot.
The beloved arcade classic, which was infamously bad and overrated for me personally, may not be as bad as I claimed in April of 2021. I'm willing to cede the fact that it contains some incredibly unique visuals and set pieces taking place in a futuristic spin on the Soviet Union, which is a commendably creative idea. I honestly love the way the game looks, and all the different enemies also have pretty cool designs, but the music is, on the other hand, incredibly inconsistent. Sometimes it has a great charm to it and sounds very funky and futuristic like St. Petersburg 1, but other times it is shrill, horrible, and annoying like Aerial Battleship 1. The gameplay is really where things get screwed up, though. As I said, the jumping control ruins the idea of an acrobatic main character, which is really what made the game stand out from the crowd of side-scrollers in the first place. The fact that you can only jump straight up or in this awful cartwheel that you can't control after initiating, though, completely ruins the control. The climbing and grappling are okay and quite impressive for the time, but when trying to make precise jumps, it just doesn't work. The difficulty is also insane, with you only getting 3 hit points, yet there being enemies all over the place, many of which are very hard to dodge, like the mini-bosses. And combine that with cheap shots like placing fire on the ground after you kill one of said mini-bosses, and you have a truly horrible experience.
Yeah, I was, unfortunately, correct. The game sucks. It's terrible. I mean, it's just as bad, if not worse, than I said it was back in April of 2021. Yeah. I wasn't being unfair to the game. In fact, maybe I was being too fair to it. And I'm not really holding out that much hope that the Master System version is going to do that much to improve upon it. I mean, this game was already like drinking dirty water straight out of the Thames and getting cholera from it. So, I'm really not going to hold my breath for this game. I'm actually holding my breath so I don't drown from chugging all this dirty Thames water.
It's the same game. with worse visuals and sound, granted, but I'll be honest, the visuals still look really nice considering that this is an 8-bit console, so overall, not bad. That is for a port of a game that's incredibly bad to begin with.
Yeah, it's not an improvement. Now, it is impressive for the console, but still not worth playing whatsoever. I mean, if the first Strider on arcade and Genesis was like drinking Thames water and getting ill, this is like adding leeches into the mix, so you're getting your blood sucked as well. It's just boring and not fun and frustrating all at the same time. But there is a hope. A new hope. Yeah, that's right. They made an NES version. Yes. Now, I'm not really going to think that this game will be that much of an improvement. I highly doubt it. But it is a complete genre shift. It's a completely different game, rather than the Master System version, which is just a weaker port of an already super weak game. So maybe, just maybe, it'll be an improvement. I mean, if you look at a game like Ninja Gaiden, it also did the same thing. It was a complete shift from how it was in the arcades, and it ended up being a classic NES game. So, let's try it.
While all other versions of Strider were the same uniform arcadey side-scroller, the NES version of all things was the one to go for something far more ambitious. Rather than a typical, far more linear style, the gameplay opens up into many different levels that have different paths to explore. You'll find items and information on where to go next and continue your journey, and combined with the varied set pieces, it makes for an impressive and interesting experience for the most part. Even the story is pretty interesting, involving a conflict for the main character and compelling ideas, which is not so common for an NES game. It reminds me once again of Ninja Gaiden, which had a phenomenal narrative for the time. And though there are some errors with the dialogue, it still motivates you to go forward. The visuals and music aren't anything particularly impressive, but they're nowhere near bad, and they keep the game at a relatively interesting level. All of this got me really excited to start playing the game, and fortunately, it's actually okay. Now, there are some big problems, mainly how enemies just pop out and you have to react incredibly quickly to avoid getting hit, which is nearly impossible. But it's an improvement for sure. In addition to this, the game is pretty cryptic and confusing, but for a game this ambitious on the NES, that was bound to happen. If you look at a game like Zelda, it has a fair amount of cryptic nonsense, so you can tell this was during the time where game developers still hadn't really found out how to make an expansive world perfect with how you navigate it, which is something that many of them still struggle to get right to this day. There's a fair amount of backtracking through these levels that you have to do, and dying during these parts is really annoying and could have been easily fixed by allowing you to exit the level via another path, for example with a more circular design for stages. But in the end, it's definitely not that important of a game to check out, even for NES super fans. But if you want a decent time killer with incredible scope, but as a result some painful flaws, I recommend it.
Now, we have to keep in mind that this game came out on a console that brought us some of the worst horse crap imaginable, and it's certainly above anything like that. But it also came out on the same console that brought us so many great classics. So at the end of the day, it's just smushed in between the memorable games that are memorable just because they're terrible, and the memorable games that are memorable just because they're amazing. Just kind of forgotten, and not for that bad of a reason, to be honest. Now, the things that do set it apart, like the open level design and branching story that's actually quite interesting, are done way better in games that are overall more memorable and high quality, like Ninja Gaiden and Zelda, respectively. So, at the end of the day, this one's not really worth playing either, to be quite honest. It isn't bad by any means. In fact, it's pretty good, especially for the console, but I wouldn't really recommend spending any time on it when there's so many games that do everything it does a lot better. But they actually made a direct sequel to Strider. So let's move on finally to the feature presentation, the thing you've all been waiting for. What really could save this franchise? Strider 2. Come on, be the beacon, be the light at the end of this tunnel. I really hope it is, because if it isn't, I think I'm going to jump off a cliff. So, yeah, let's check out Strider 2. Let's see if it can finally improve upon Strider. If it can finally bring this series to the glory that so many claimed it had from the beginning. Let's see if Strider 2 is one of the best sequels out there and improves upon everything wrong with the first one. I'm hopeful. I can't believe this! This game is somehow worse than the original. And the original was already a painstaking journey to trudge through, and then you take that, shove it through a dirty sewer, and pull it out to get the Master System version. But this is worse than either of those. And yes, I know I shouldn't have expected much, but the NES version was pretty good. It gave me hope that Strider 2 could be a legitimately worthy sequel and actually do a good job. But instead, it is, without a doubt, the worst Strider game I have ever played. And that's saying something for a series that doesn't really have any remarkable games so far. I mean, wow. My mind is blown. It's astonishing. How could they do this?
Strider 2 barely looks much better than the original, and the annoying gripes present in said game are pushed to the goddamn 11th degree. It's so frustrating that I could barely get past one of the first enemies just a few minutes in, trying as hard as I can.
And it's not like I'm some novice or newcomer at this. I've beaten many hard games like this, like the classic Mega Man games. I should be able to get through this with, granted, some challenge and frustration, but not be able to get past the first level? Are you mad?
And in just those first few moments, the game combines the horrible jumping controls with projectiles that come through the screen faster than the feds caught me for trying to evade property taxes on my 17th yacht like my hero Jeff Bezos, and that you also can destroy. At the very least, in the NES game, you could kill the enemies that popped up quickly almost immediately if you had the reflexes of a star-nosed mole, but here it seems nearly impossible. Maybe you're supposed to recognize the pattern of the rockets if there even is one, but I shouldn't have to die 20 times just to figure that out. I stated that as my second biggest problem with Celeste, a phenomenal game, but this does it all the time rather than just occasionally, and the design is so often confined and mundane that you won't even want to persevere. It manages to be boring and frustrating at the same time, which is really a spectacular achievement, isn't it?
I mean, it's just shocking how they managed to screw it up this badly. Playing Strider 2 is like playing the first one while also trying to get rid of a kidney stone. It's just so painful in every way you can and can't imagine. I'd rather go through rounds and rounds of medieval torture just to say at the end of said torture that at least, at the goddamn very least, I didn't have to play Strider 2. I mean, even for fans of the original, it must be terrible. And that's saying something. You know, Jack 2? Maybe that wasn't even so bad. Guys! I figured something out! I found something out! I discovered something amazing! that Strider 2 that I just played, the one so bad it made me lose my mind and say that this piece of garbage is maybe actually not that bad. It is, trust me. That was the unofficial version. But there's an official Strider sequel out there. So maybe, just maybe, this final chance, they won't screw it up. Alright, let's try it out.
Strider 2 is not only the best game in the Strider series by a long shot, it's one of the most addictive arcade-style games I've ever played, and a bona fide PlayStation 1 classic. The missions are short but sweet, the visuals incredibly colorful and striking mixtures of 3D backgrounds and 2D pixel art characters, and the gameplay so fluid and hectic that you won't be bored for a moment. They've cranked that mobility way up so you really feel like a ninja. It truly feels worthy of the PlayStation, having all kinds of fun moves to pull off, especially the slide, and so many different types of enemies that you will blaze through so quickly and efficiently. You never have to just wait and wait or get annoyed at having to restart due to a death, as there are plenty of continues to keep that beautiful flow intact and keep the experience always fun.
They did it. They did it. Not only did these crazy bastards finally figure out how to make a tolerable and playable game, they made one that's not just good, not just great, but amazing. Buried under the dung heap that is the Strider franchise, there is one underlooked masterpiece here. I mean, this is the biggest surprise I've ever experienced in this whole series. I'm legitimately shocked. I did not expect this game to be any good. At most, I was expecting an okay side-scroller. No, this is something else. This is one of the most addictive and fun games I've played in a long time. I enjoyed every second of it. How did they do it? How did they jump from so bad to so good? It's kind of incredible. But, yeah. So, I guess it was worth it. I guess the journey of the Strider series was worth it. We found the light at the end of this long tunnel of Kasumatsu, of British horrors, and of terrible music, to finally find a beacon, a hope, something great. And Strider 2 gets a score of diamond in the rough. I'm very happy. You know, I didn't expect there to be a redemption arc for the Strider series, but I suppose that's what we got. Now, yes, there is a 2014 reboot of the series, so maybe I'll talk about that eventually. But for now, thank you all for watching. Thank you all for going through this journey with me to find the light at the end of the tunnel. Be safe, everybody, and goodbye.